In an overseas military-based gym, a quiet logistics officer was about to face the ultimate test of respect. What started as a routine PT session took a shocking turn when she came face-to-face with a commander who publicly questioned whether she belonged among real soldiers. Lieutenant Elena Markov wasn't your typical desk officer. For years before joining the military, she had spent her life competing on international powerlifting stages, known for techniques so flawless it made world record lifts look effortless. When she encountered Commander Price's theatrical challenge, 315 pounds loaded with theatrical precision, she had no idea the entire unit was watching her every move. Elena's calm response to strip the bar completely and reload it with 340 pounds would lead to a moment that redefined strength itself. What began as toxic gym politics would become a masterclass in quiet dominance. The overseas-based gym would never be the same after a woman proved that the most devastating statements are made in perfect silence. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The overseas-based gym carried the particular scent of ambition mixed with testosterone. Rubber mats soaked in years of sweat, industrial-grade disinfectant fighting a losing battle against the musk of competitive masculinity, and the metallic tang of iron plates that had been gripped by countless hands seeking to prove their worth. Lieutenant Elena Markov paused in the doorway, her dark eyes sweeping across the space with a methodical assessment of someone trained to read environments before committing to them fully. The facility stretched before her like a temple to physical dominance. Free weights dominated the center floor, their chrome surfaces reflecting the harsh fluorescent lighting that cast everything in sharp relief. Bench presses, squat racks, and deadlift platforms formed small territories where soldiers claimed their space through sheer force of presence. Along the walls, newer machines hummed quietly, but Elena could see they were largely ignored. This was a place where respect was earned with barbells and plates, not computerized resistance. She noted the social geography immediately. Commander Nathan Price occupied the central bench press station like a king holding court. His uniform sleeves rolled tight around forearms that spoke of dedicated hours under the iron. His laugh carried across the room, not the genuine sound of shared humor, but the calculated projection of a man who understood that leadership sometimes meant performing strength as much as possessing it. 3 soldiers clustered around him, their body language speaking the universal language of subordinates seeking approval from the apex predator. "Elena, right?" The voice came from her left, soft enough to avoid drawing attention from the main drama unfolding across the room. Corporal Mia Huang stepped closer, her compact frame moving with the efficiency of someone comfortable in her own skin. Unlike the theatrical displays happening elsewhere, Mia carried herself with quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need an audience to validate its existence. "Lieutenant Markov?" Elena replied, her voice carrying the formal courtesy that marked her as someone still learning the unspoken rules of this particular ecosystem. Mia's smile held a hint of conspiracy. "Fair warning, this place has its own pecking order. It's not about rank in here, it's about how much weight you can move and how loudly you can announce it to everyone else." She nodded toward the central cluster. "Commander Price sets the tone. He's not malicious, but he's competitive. And Sergeant Vega there," she indicated a stocky man with the build of a former football player, "considers himself the unofficial gatekeeper of who belongs in the serious lifting area." Elena absorbed this information without comment, her gaze tracking the movement patterns of the room's occupants. Sergeant Luis Vega was indeed performing his role as Price's lieutenant, his voice cutting through conversations with the kind of casual cruelty that passed for camaraderie among men who had forgotten the difference between confidence and arrogance. A younger soldier, barely out of his teens by the look of him, hovered at the edges of their circle, clearly eager to prove himself worthy of inclusion. "Desk job build?" Vega's voice carried across the room, though his gaze wasn't directed at anyone in particular. Elena made no reaction beyond a slight adjustment of her gym bag's position on her shoulder. She had learned long ago that the first response often determined the entire trajectory of a relationship, and she preferred to let others reveal their character before she revealed hers. "You lifting today or just observing?" Mia asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. "Lifting," Elena replied, simply, "but I'll start over there." She nodded toward a bench in the far corner, away from the main theater of dominance playing out in the center of the room. As she crossed the floor, Elena felt the weight of observations settling on her shoulders. Conversations didn't stop, but their rhythm changed slightly, the way discussions alter when everyone is simultaneously listening to something else. She was being cataloged, assessed, filed away in the mental hierarchies that every group constructs to understand where power flows and respect lives. Commander Price's eyes found her as she passed, and she felt the particular intensity of a predator evaluating potential prey. Not malicious, as Mia had said, but calculating. His gaze lingered on her frame, compact, economical, built for function rather than display, and she could practically hear him drawing conclusions about what she represented and where she fit in his carefully constructed world. The mandatory PT session began with the ritual familiar to military installations worldwide. Commander Price positioned himself at the front of the group, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to having his words shape reality for everyone in earshot. "Today we separate the paper pushers from the iron pushers," he announced, his grin taking some of the sting out of the comment, but not all of it. "Warm-ups first, then we see what everyone's really made of." The group moved through their stretching routines with varying degrees of enthusiasm and competence. Elena found herself positioned near the back, which suited her perfectly. From here, she could observe the intricate social dance unfolding before her. Who deferred to whom? Who competed with whom? Who was trying too hard to impress, and who had already established their place in the hierarchy? Sergeant Vega took his role as Price's demonstration partner seriously, moving through the warm-up exercises with theatrical precision designed to showcase the kind of power that came from dedicated gym time and a diet built around protein shakes. His commentary filled the spaces between exercises, a steady stream of observations about proper form, the importance of commitment, and thinly veiled challenges disguised as encouragement. "Remember, people," Vega called out as they moved toward the weights, "iron doesn't lie. Can't fake your way through a deadlift or charm your way through a bench press. The bar either goes up or it doesn't." Elena began her own warm-up with methodical precision, loading modest weight onto an Olympic barbell and working through a range of motion that spoke of deep familiarity with the movements. Every rep was deliberate, controlled, performed with the kind of attention to detail that marked someone who understood that perfection was built through countless repetitions of near perfection. "You need the training wheels for that bar?" Vega's voice cut through her concentration, though his tone remained light enough to be dismissed as friendly ribbing if challenged. "We've got some lighter plates if those are too much for you." The comment drew chuckles from the soldiers within earshot, the kind of laughter that invited participation without demanding it. Elena continued her set without acknowledging the provocation, her breathing steady, her form flawless. Private Aaron Holt, the young soldier she'd noticed earlier, glanced between Elena and Vega with the uncomfortable expression of someone watching a dynamic he didn't fully understand but suspected might turn ugly. His own workout had been enthusiastic but sloppy, all effort and no technique, the hallmark of someone who understood that strength was important but hadn't yet learned how to build it efficiently. "Logistics officers," Commander Price observed, his voice pitched to carry without seeming deliberately loud, "spend more time lifting spreadsheets than barbells. Different kind of muscle memory." The comment was delivered with a smile that took some of the edge off, but the message was clear. He was drawing lines between who belonged in his world and who was just visiting. Elena finished her set and moved to add weight, her movements unhurried and precise. She loaded the bar with what most would consider moderate weight, not heavy enough to impress, but substantial enough to indicate she wasn't intimidated by iron. The plate settled onto the bar with the solid clank of metal finding its proper place. Mia appeared at Elena's side, ostensibly to adjust her own equipment, but actually to provide subtle support. "Ignore the commentary," she said quietly. "They're testing boundaries, standard operating procedure for new arrivals." "I know," Elena replied, her voice carrying no heat, no defensiveness, no indication that the comments had found their mark. She positioned herself under the bar and performed another set, each rep controlled and deliberate, her breathing never varying from its steady rhythm. Across the room, she could see Price watching her with increased interest. Her refusal to rise to the bait had apparently elevated her from amusing newcomer to minor puzzle. Reactions didn't fit the expected patterns. She finished her set and re-racked the weight with the same precision she'd shown throughout. "Form looks solid," Aaron said, approaching with the awkward enthusiasm of someone trying to navigate between conflicting loyalties. "You've done this before." "Everyone's done this before," Elena replied, though her tone held no dismissal. "The question is whether you're doing it to get stronger or doing it to look like you're getting stronger." The session continued around her, but Elena found herself slipping into a different mode of observation, one that had served her well in previous assignments and in competitions that felt like lifetime ago. She began cataloging the personalities around her, not as social obstacles to navigate, but as systems to understand and, if necessary, to operate within. Commander Price lifted with the confidence of natural strength amplified by dedicated training, but his technique relied heavily on momentum and aggression. Powerful, certainly, but not refined. His spotters were chosen more for their willingness to provide enthusiastic encouragement than for their ability to actually assist if something went wrong. Everything about his approach to the weights spoke of someone who had learned to dominate through force of will rather than perfect technique. Sergeant Vega possessed obvious strength and experience, but his attention was constantly divided between his own lifting and his commentary on everyone else's. He spotted carelessly, more focused on maintaining his stream of banter than on the safety of the person under the bar. His form was solid, but not exceptional. Good enough to impress soldiers who didn't know better, but carrying the small flaws that spoke of someone who had reached a plateau and decided it was good enough. Private Holt struggled with weight that should have been manageable for someone his size and apparent fitness level, but his technique was so inefficient that he was working 3 times harder than necessary for half the results. His enthusiasm was genuine, but completely misdirected. During a rest period between sets, Elena noticed Holt struggling with his bench press form, his elbows flaring wide and his grip inconsistent. She watched him complete a set that looked more like a wrestling match with the barbell than a controlled strength exercise. "Try tucking your elbows closer to your ribs and move your grip in about an inch on each side," she said quietly as he sat up, breathing hard. Holt looked at her uncertainly, then glanced toward the central group where Price and Vega were engaged in their own session. The conflict was written clearly on his face. Accept advice from the newcomer or stick with the established order. "Just try it with lighter weight," Elena suggested. "See how it feels." Curiosity won. Holt reduced the weight and adjusted his position according to Elena's suggestions. The difference was immediate and dramatic. The barbell moved smoothly through its range of motion, his breathing remained controlled, and the strain on his face was replaced by something approaching surprise. "Holy shit," he breathed, then glanced around nervously to see if anyone had noticed his profanity. That feels completely different." "Leverage," Elena said simply. "Small adjustments make big differences." The exchange had not gone unnoticed. Commander Price's eyes found them from across the room, his expression shifting from casual interest to something more focused. He completed his current set and approached, his pace deliberate enough to draw attention from the soldiers in his orbit. "Giving coaching tips, Lieutenant?" he asked, his tone light but carrying an undercurrent of challenge. "That's ambitious for someone who just arrived." just sharing what works. And what makes you think you know what works better than the people who've been training here for months? The question was delivered with a smile, but everyone within earshot understood it as a line being drawn in the sand. I don't, Elena replied, her tone maintaining its level tone. I just know what I've learned works for me. Price's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. Well, next session we'll have to see what you can really do. Give everyone a chance to learn from your experience. The words hung in the air like a challenge formally issued, witnessed by enough people to make backing down an admission of weakness. Elena simply nodded, as if he had suggested they discuss the weather tomorrow. As the session wound down and soldiers began cleaning their equipment and heading for the showers, Mia fell into step beside Elena. You know he's going to make a show of it, right? Next time, this place will be packed. He won't just want to see what you can lift, he'll want everyone else to see it too. Elena wiped down her equipment with the same methodical care she'd shown throughout the session. I know. And you're okay with that? Elena looked across the room where Price was holding court, his voice animated as he described his planned lifting session for the next day. Vega was already adding his own
commentary about reality checks and keeping things interesting. Aaron Holt listened with rapt attention, though his glances kept drifting back toward Elena with something that might have been newfound respect. I'm okay with whatever needs to happen, Elena said finally, shouldering her bag and heading toward the exit. But I choose when and how it happens, not him. As she walked away, she could feel the weight of observation following her, the sense that tomorrow's session had already begun in the minds of everyone who had witnessed today's exchange. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, she had accomplished exactly what she had set out to do: establish her presence, measure the opposition, and lay the groundwork for whatever came next. The door closed behind her with a soft hiss of hydraulics, leaving the lingering tension of unfinished business hanging in the air like the scent of iron and ambition that defined the space she was already learning to navigate. The mid-session break arrived with the inevitable gathering around the water station, where conversations flowed as freely as the sports drinks, and everyone pretended they weren't sizing up everyone else's performance. Commander Price used these moments like a conductor directing an orchestra, his voice carrying just far enough to include whomever he wanted in his sphere of influence, while maintaining the illusion of casual conversation. Elena remained at her corner station, methodically adjusting her equipment and reviewing her planned sets with the kind of quiet focus that marked someone who treated training as work rather than theater. But she could feel the attention building around her like pressure before a storm, and she knew Price was orchestrating something that would require her participation whether she wanted it or not. "You know what this place needs?" Price announced, his voice pitched to carry across the entire gym floor. "A little friendly competition, something to remind everyone why we're here." He slapped his hands together, the sound sharp enough to cut through the ambient conversation and focus every eye in the room on him. Sergeant Vega materialized beside him with the eager anticipation of someone who sensed opportunity for entertainment. "What did you have in mind, Commander?" Price's grin was wide and predatory as he gestured toward the central bench press station. "Nothing too serious, just a chance for everyone to show what they're working with." He began stripping plates from nearby bars and loading them onto the bench press with theatrical precision, each 45-pound plate hitting the bar with a metallic clang that echoed through the suddenly quiet space. Elena watched the performance from her position across the room, noting how Price added weight past what most of the soldiers present could handle, making his challenge exclusive by design. The message was clear. This wasn't an invitation for everyone. This was a test for anyone who thought they belonged in the same conversation as the established hierarchy. 315 should separate the pretenders from the contenders. Vega added with obvious relish, his voice carrying the kind of anticipation that suggested he already knew how this would unfold. Anyone feel like stepping up? The silence that followed was pregnant with possibility and danger. Elena could see the soldiers around the room calculating their own capabilities against the weight on the bar, most reaching the obvious conclusion that discretion was the better part of valor. The smart ones found sudden interest in their water bottles or equipment adjustments. But Price's gaze had already found its intended target. "How about you, Lieutenant?" His voice carried across the room with deceptive casualness. "You seemed pretty confident giving advice earlier. Want to show everyone what logistics training teaches you about moving weight?" The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down in front of witnesses who could never allow it to be forgotten. Elena felt the familiar sensation of standing at a crossroads where every option carried consequences and no choice was truly neutral. She could feel every eye in the room settling on her, waiting to see whether she would rise to the bait or confirm their assumptions about what she represented. "I appreciate the offer, Commander," Elena replied, her voice carrying clearly but without the projection Price was using. "But I'm here to complete my assigned PT requirements, not to perform." The laughter that followed was immediate and ugly, the sound of pack animals sensing weakness and moving to exploit it. Vega led the charge with theatrical appreciation for what he clearly saw as a diplomatic retreat disguised as professionalism. "Assigned requirements," he repeated, drawing out each syllable like he was savoring the taste. "That's what I love about logistics, always looking for the minimum acceptable standard." Price's expression shifted into something that might have been sympathy if it hadn't been so obviously calculated. "No pressure, Lieutenant. Not everyone's built for this kind of thing. Nothing wrong with knowing your limitations." Elena finished securing her equipment and shouldered her gym bag with the same measured precision she'd shown throughout the session. "I'll see everyone at the next scheduled PT session," she said, her tone as neutral as if she were announcing the weather forecast. As she walked toward the exit, she could hear Price's voice rising behind her, already shifting into planning mode. "Tell you what, people, next session, we'll make this interesting. Real challenge, real stakes. Anyone brave enough to step up gets the chance to prove they belong in the big leagues." The door closed behind Elena with a soft, pneumatic hiss, but she could still feel the weight of expectation following her like a shadow. Tomorrow's session had just transformed from routine PT into something approaching a gladiatorial event, and everyone present understood that she had been cast in the role of sacrificial lamb. The women's locker room felt like a sanctuary after the testosterone-charged atmosphere of the gym floor. Elena sat on the narrow bench in front of her assigned locker, methodically checking her lifting gloves for wear and adjusting the Velcro straps with the kind of attention to detail that spoke of long-developed habits. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate, carrying none of the tension that might have been expected from someone who had just been publicly challenged. The door opened with a quiet click, and Mia Huang entered, her own gym bag slung over one shoulder, and her expression thoughtful. She moved to her own locker without speaking immediately, giving Elena space to process whatever needed processing before conversation became necessary. "He has a history of this," Mia said finally, her voice pitched low enough to ensure privacy even in the empty space. "Price, I mean. He finds someone new, tests their breaking point, then either brings them into the inner circle or makes their life difficult until they transfer out." Elena looked up from her equipment inspection, her dark eyes meeting Mia's with steady attention. "What usually happens?" "Most people either fold immediately or make a show of trying and fail spectacularly. Either way, Price gets what he wants. Confirmation that he's the alpha and everyone else knows it." Mia's tone carried the weight of someone who had witnessed this pattern multiple times. "The few who actually challenge him, well, let's say he doesn't handle that well." "And you're telling me this because?" Mia's smile held genuine warmth. "Because you don't strike me as someone who folds, And I want you to know you'll have at least one ally when things get complicated. Elena resumed her equipment check, her fingers tracing over the lifting straps with practiced efficiency. I'm not avoiding tomorrow's challenge because I can't handle it. I'm avoiding it because I believe in choosing the right moment for the right reasons. The words hung in the air between them, carrying implications that Mia was clearly working to understand. Before she could respond, the locker room door opened again, and Private Aaron Holt's voice echoed from the entrance. "Sorry, thought this was empty." He stopped abruptly as he realized his mistake, his face flushing red with embarrassment. "I was looking for... I wanted to ask..." He glanced between Elena and Mia, clearly wrestling with how to navigate the social complexity of the situation. "What is it, Aaron?" Mia asked, with the kind of gentle authority that invited honesty. "I wanted to ask Lieutenant Markov where she learned that technique she showed me, the bench press thing. It made such a difference, and I've never felt anything like that before." Elena studied the young soldier's face, noting the genuine curiosity behind his awkward enthusiasm. "Somewhere that doesn't matter anymore," she replied, echoing the words she would use again tomorrow. "What matters is that it helps you get stronger safely." "But where, though? You clearly know things that the rest of us don't. And after today," he trailed off, apparently realizing he was straying into territory that might be sensitive. "After today, what?" Elena's tone remained level, but Mia could hear the slight edge that suggested Aaron had wandered close to something significant. "After today, I'm wondering if maybe we've been learning from the wrong people." The words hung in the air between them, carrying implications that Mia was clearly working to understand. "You should get to evening formation," Elena told Aaron gently. "And remember what I showed you about elbow position. Practice it with light weight until it becomes automatic." Aaron nodded eagerly and backed toward the door, but paused at the threshold. "Lieutenant, tomorrow, when Price does his challenge thing, are you going to—" Elena's smile was small but unmistakable. "We'll see what tomorrow brings." The next day's gym session carried an electric anticipation that transformed the usual PT routine into something approaching a spectacle. Word had spread through the barracks with the efficiency of military gossip, and the facility held nearly twice its usual complement of soldiers, many of whom had found creative reasons to be present during what was typically a mandatory session for only Elena's unit. Commander Price arrived 15 minutes early, moving through his warm-up routine with the calculated precision of someone who understood he was performing for an audience. His usual training partners flanked him like a supporting cast, their conversation loud enough to carry across the room, but carefully crafted to sound casual rather than rehearsed. Sergeant Vega had clearly embraced his role as master of ceremonies, his voice cutting through the ambient noise with commentary designed to build anticipation while maintaining plausible deniability about the event's true purpose. "Should be an interesting session today," he announced to no one in particular. "Always good to see what people are really working with when the pressure's on." The bench press station had been cleared and positioned like an altar at the center of the gym floor. Fresh plates had been loaded nearby, their chrome surfaces gleaming under the fluorescent lights like promises of glory or humiliation, depending on who approached them. The surrounding equipment had been repositioned to create natural viewing areas, transforming functional exercise space into an arena. Private Holt moved through his own warm-up with obvious nervous energy, his glances alternating between the central stage and the entrance where Elena would eventually appear. His loyalty was clearly divided, torn between his admiration for Price's established dominance and his growing curiosity about what Elena might be capable of if given the opportunity to demonstrate it. Mia positioned herself at a station with clear sightlines to the entire gym, her own routine methodical but secondary to her role as observer and potential ally. She had arrived early enough to claim equipment that would allow her to move quickly if circumstances required intervention. "Think she'll show?" someone asked, in a voice pitched just loud enough to be heard, but quiet enough to maintain deniability.
"She'll show," Price replied with absolute confidence. "Question is whether she'll step up or find another excuse to avoid reality." The door opened with its familiar pneumatic hiss, and Elena entered as if this were any other mandatory PT session. Her gym bag was slung over one shoulder with casual efficiency, her uniform crisp but not obsessively perfect, her movement carrying the unhurried pace of someone who arrived exactly when she intended to arrive rather than when circumstances demanded it. The conversation level in the room dropped noticeably as she made her way to an empty section of floor space and began her warm-up routine. Every eye tracked her movements, looking for signs of nervousness, preparation, or strategy. They found none. Elena moved through her stretches and light exercises with the same methodical precision she had shown the day before, as if the weight of expectation filling the room was invisible to her. "Morning, Lieutenant," Price called out, his voice carrying the false hardiness of someone extending hospitality he didn't genuinely feel. "Ready for a real workout today?" Elena glanced in his direction with polite acknowledgement. "Ready for PT, Commander?" Vega's laugh carried an edge of anticipation. "Well, we've got something special planned. Thought you might want to show everyone what logistics training really teaches about moving heavy weight." The challenge was now officially public, witnessed by enough people to make backing down a story that would follow Elena through the rest of her assignment and possibly beyond. She continued her warm-up without responding immediately, loading a barbell with moderate weight and working through a series of movements that demonstrated perfect form and complete control. "You know," Price said, moving to the central bench and beginning to load plates with theatrical precision, each plate hit the bar with a metallic clang that echoed through the increasingly quiet space. "Sometimes the right moment chooses you." Elena finished her set and re-racked the weight with the same careful attention she had shown throughout. She stood for a moment, studying the scene before her, the loaded bar, the expectant faces, the weight of assumption and prejudice hanging in the air like smoke from a fire that had been building since her arrival.
"Sometimes it does," she agreed quietly. The moment Elena stepped toward the central bench press station, the gymnasium fell into a silence so complete that the hum of the ventilation system became audible for the first time. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every piece of equipment seemed to freeze in motion, and the very air felt charged with the kind of tension that precedes either triumph or disaster. Price stepped back from the bar with exaggerated courtesy, his gesture encompassing the bench like a host offering the finest seat at his table. "All yours, Lieutenant. Let's see what you got." Elena approached the equipment with the same methodical pace she had maintained throughout both sessions, but now her movements carried a different quality, the precision of someone shifting from preparation into execution. She examined the bar Price had loaded, noting the weight distribution and the slightly uneven spacing of the plates that suggested theatrical loading rather than competitive precision. Without comment, she began unloading the bar completely, stripping it down to its naked chrome surface, while every eye in the room tracked her movements with the intensity of spectators watching a magician's hands for the moment when sleight transforms into magic. The plates came off with rhythmic clangs, each one hitting the floor like a countdown to something no one quite understood yet. "Starting light?" Vega asked, his voice carrying the kind of false encouragement that barely concealed disappointment. "Smart approach. Work your way up slowly." Elena ignored the commentary, moving to the plate rack with the efficient purpose of someone who knew exactly what she intended to accomplish. She selected her weights with the care of a surgeon choosing instruments. Each plate tested for balance and condition before being deemed acceptable for her purposes. The first pair of 45-pound plates slid onto the bar with a solid metallic ring of serious weight finding its proper place. Elena secured them with clips, tested the balance, and added a second pair. The murmur that rippled through the crowd was barely audible, but unmistakable. This was already more weight than most of the soldiers present had expected her to attempt. She continued loading with methodical precision, adding a third pair of 45s, then smaller plates to fine-tune the total. Each addition drew the gathered crowd deeper into silence, their casual confidence gradually replaced by something approaching bewilderment. The bar now held more weight than anyone had seen her handle, more than most of them could handle themselves. "Jesus," someone whispered. "How much is that?" Elena made a final adjustment to the clips and stepped back to survey her work. 340 pounds of iron sat on the bar like a challenge to physics, to assumption, to every preconception that had been built around her quiet presence and unassuming demeanor. "That's," Aaron's voice cracked slightly, "that's more than Commander Price's max." The observation hung in the air like an accusation, and Elena could feel the attention in the room shift from curious anticipation to something approaching awe. Price himself stood frozen, his expression cycling through disbelief, calculation, and what might have been the first stirrings of genuine respect. Mia appeared at Elena's side without being summoned, moving into spotter position with the fluid grace of someone who had performed this role countless times before. Her presence was both practical and symbolic, a statement that whatever was about to happen would be done safely and with proper support. Elena lay back on the bench and positioned herself under the bar with movements so economical and precise they spoke of muscle memory developed through thousands of repetitions. Her feet found their optimal position on the floor, her shoulders settled into perfect alignment, and her hands gripped the knurled steel with exactly the spacing and pressure required for maximum mechanical advantage. The gymnasium had become a cathedral of anticipation. Every breath held, every heartbeat seemingly synchronized with the woman preparing to attempt something that would either confirm or shatter every assumption that had been built around her presence in their world. "Ready when you are," Mia said quietly, her hands positioned to assist if needed, but not interfering with Elena's preparation. Elena's eyes closed for a moment, her breathing settling into the rhythm that would carry her through the lift. When they opened again, they held the focused intensity of someone who had moved beyond performance and entered the realm of pure execution. "Liftoff," she said simply. The bar came off the rack with the controlled precision of a precision instrument finding its proper trajectory, 340 pounds of iron moving through space as if it weighed no more than an empty barbell. Elena held it steady above her chest, every muscle fiber engaged in the delicate balance between power and control that separated successful lifts from catastrophic failures.
In the absolute silence that surrounded her, she began the descent that would either make her a legend or confirm every doubt that had been whispered since her arrival. The bar descended towards Elena's chest with the controlled precision of a master craftsman guiding a tool through its intended path. 340 pounds of iron moved through space as if governed by laws different from those that applied to everyone else in the room. Each inch of the descent measured and deliberate, controlled by muscles that understood their task with the clarity that comes only from years of perfect repetition. There was no struggle visible in Elena's face, no grimace of effort or strain that might have suggested she was approaching her limits. Her breathing remained steady and controlled, each inhalation and exhalation timed to the mechanical rhythm of the lift. The bar touched her chest with the gentle precision of a feather landing on still water, paused for the briefest moment required by proper form, and then began its journey back toward the ceiling. The ascent was poetry written in iron and physics. Elena's arms extended with the smooth power of hydraulic pistons, the massive weight rising through space as if it had suddenly become weightless.
Her form remained flawless throughout, elbows tracking in perfect alignment, shoulders stable against the bench, core engaged to transfer power from her legs through her torso and into her arms with the efficiency that separated true strength from mere muscle. The silence in the gymnasium was so complete it felt oppressive, as if the very air had been evacuated to create a vacuum where sound could not exist. 24 soldiers stood frozen in various poses of disbelief, their mouths slightly open, their eyes wide with the particular expression that comes when reality proves to be fundamentally different from expectation. Even the mechanical hum of the ventilation system seemed to have stopped, leaving only the soft whisper of Elena's controlled breathing and the almost inaudible creak of the bar under load. Commander Price stood transfixed, his usual confidence replaced by something approaching awe. The casual smirk that had defined his expression throughout the build-up to this moment had vanished completely, replaced by the blank stare of someone watching their understanding of the world undergo real-time revision. His hands hung at his sides as if he had forgotten how to use them, and his mouth moved slightly as if trying to form words that his brain could not quite supply. Sergeant Vega's theatrical commentary had died in his throat somewhere during the descent, leaving him standing with one hand raised in a gesture that had been intended to accompany some quip about logistics officers and desk jobs. Instead, he looked like a statue of a man caught in the moment before speech, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, confusion, and what might have been the dawning recognition that he had seriously misjudged the situation. Private Aaron Holt had abandoned all pretense of continuing his own workout, his barbell sitting forgotten on the floor beside him as he stared at Elena with the wide-eyed wonder of someone witnessing something that would become a defining memory. His youth made his amazement particularly transparent. He had not yet learned to hide his emotions behind the practiced neutrality that military service eventually taught everyone. Somehow determine how this moment would be remembered, and what it would mean for everyone present. The first sound to break the cathedral silence was the soft exhalation that escaped from Commander Price's lips. Not quite a whistle, not quite a sigh, but something that carried the weight of a man coming to terms with a fundamental miscalculation. He stepped forward slowly, his usual commanding presence replaced by something more tentative, more human. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice carrying none of its earlier theatrical projection. That was exceptional." Elena looked up from her methodical process of unloading the bar, her expression as neutral as it had been throughout both PT sessions. "Thank you, Commander." The simplicity of the exchange seemed to unlock the frozen atmosphere, and conversations began to resume in hushed tones around the gym floor. But the quality of those conversations had changed fundamentally. Where before there had been casual dismissal and mocking commentary, now there was something approaching reverence, mixed with bewilderment. Price moved closer to the bench, his eyes tracking Elena's movements as she continued to strip plates from the bar with efficient precision. "Where did you learn to lift like that?" "Somewhere that doesn't matter anymore," Elena replied, echoing the words she had used with Aaron the day before. She hefted a 45-pound plate with casual ease and carried it to the rack, her movement showing no trace of fatigue despite having just completed a lift that exceeded the capabilities of everyone else in the room. "It matters to me," Price said quietly, his tone stripped of the competitive edge that had defined their previous interactions. That was world-class technique. Competition level." Elena paused in her work, studying Price's face with the same analytical attention she had given to everyone else's lifting form. She seemed to be weighing something, calculating not just what to say, but whether this was the right moment to say it. "International competitor. Powerlifting. Before my back injury, before I joined the service." The admission hung in the air like a missing puzzle piece suddenly revealed, explaining everything that seemed inexplicable about her quiet confidence and perfect technique. Aaron's mouth fell open with an almost audible click, while Vega's face went through several expressions as he processed the implications of having spent 2 days mocking someone whose competitive achievements likely exceeded anything he had ever attempted. "International," breathed Aaron, his voice cracking slightly with adolescent amazement. "Like Olympics?" "Different organization," Elena replied with the first hint of warmth she had shown since entering the gymnasium, "but similar level of competition." Vega approached with the awkward gait of someone trying to navigate a social situation that had become far more complex than he had anticipated. His usual swagger had been replaced by something that might have been respect if it hadn't been obviously uncomfortable. "Jesus, Sergeant. Damn, if I'd known." He trailed off, apparently realizing that his apology was in danger of becoming another foot-in-the-mouth moment. "What known?" Elena asked, though her tone suggested genuine curiosity rather than challenge. "Known that that you had—" Vega struggled with how to articulate the magnitude of his miscalculation without making it worse. "I wouldn't have been such an ass about things." Elena's smile was small but unmistakable. "You weren't being an ass, Sergeant. You were protecting your territory from what you thought was an inexperienced newcomer. That's actually good leadership in most circumstances." The gracious response seemed to surprise Vega more than any rebuke would have. He blinked several times, clearly working to process this unexpected display of understanding rather than the triumph he had probably expected from someone who had just demonstrated superior capability. Aaron had been building up courage during this exchange and finally burst out with the question that had been consuming him since Elena had begun loading the bar. "Where did you learn to do that? How do you get that strong? How do you make it look so easy?" Elena finished racking the last plate and turned to face the young soldier directly. Years of doing it wrong before learning to do it right. Thousands of hours of practice, good coaching, and understanding that strength isn't about how much noise you make or how much you can impress people watching. But the technique press on Aaron, his enthusiasm overriding his military courtesy. That descent, the way you controlled it, I've never seen anything like that. "You can learn it, if you're willing to start with lightweight and focus on perfection instead of performance." Price had been listening to this exchange with growing fascination and now stepped forward with a question that seemed to cost him something to ask. Would you be willing to lead a strength training session? Show us what proper technique actually looks like?
The request represented a complete reversal of the power dynamics that had defined both PT sessions, and everyone present understood its significance. Commander Price, who had spent 2 days establishing his dominance through physical superiority, was now publicly acknowledging Elena's expertise and asking her to teach him. Elena studied his face for a moment, searching for signs of resentment or wounded pride. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "I'd be happy to help anyone who wants to learn." 3 days later, the gymnasium held the same soldiers, but carried an entirely different atmosphere. The competitive edge that had defined previous sessions had been replaced by something more collaborative, more focused on improvement than dominance. Elena moved through the space with quiet authority, offering guidance and correction with the patient precision of someone who understood that teaching was a different skill from performing. Commander Price worked through his bench press sets with newfound attention to form over weight, his ego apparently comfortable with reducing his loads in service of learning proper technique. The transformation in his approach was subtle but unmistakable. Where before he had lifted with the aggressive intensity of someone proving a point, now he moved with the controlled focus of someone genuinely trying to improve. "Slower on the descent, Commander," Elena said quietly, her voice carrying just far enough to be heard by Price and his spotter. "Think of it as controlling the weight down rather than just letting gravity do the work." Price nodded and adjusted his tempo, the bar moving through its range of motion with dramatically improved control. The difference was immediately visible, not just in the technical execution, but in the way he seemed more present in the movement, more connected to what his body was actually doing.
Sergeant Vega had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of anyone in the group. His role as unofficial gym enforcer had evolved into something more constructive. He now served as Elena's informal assistant, helping to spot and offering encouragement that was genuinely supportive rather than performatively dominant. "That's it, Holt," Vega called out as Aaron worked through a set with perfect form and significantly more weight than he had been handling the week before. "Feel that difference? That's what real strength feels like." Aaron's improvement had been remarkable, his eagerness to learn amplified by Elena's patient instruction and the new culture of collaborative improvement that had emerged in the wake of her demonstration. His sets were now characterized by the kind of controlled precision that Elena had shown, scaled appropriately to his current strength level, but building toward greater capability with every session. Mia moved through her own routine with quiet satisfaction. Her role as Elena's first ally had expanded into something approaching co-instructor. She had always possessed solid technique, but under Elena's guidance, her lifts had gained a polish and efficiency that spoke to the difference between training alone and training with expert guidance. "Lieutenant," Aaron said during a water break, "when you were competing internationally, did you always lift like that? So controlled and precise?" Elena smiled, the expression carrying more warmth than anyone in the unit had seen from her before. "It took me years to learn that control. Early in my career, I thought strength was about aggression and intensity. It wasn't until I started working with a coach who understood the difference between training and performing that I learned what real technique looked like." "What changed?" Price asked, his question carrying genuine curiosity rather than the competitive edge that had characterized his earlier interactions with Elena. "I learned that the weight doesn't care how tough you think you are or how loudly you grunt. It only responds to proper leverage, timing, and control. Everything else is just theater." The observation drew chuckles from around the group, but they were the sounds of recognition rather than mockery. Everyone present had spent time engaging in that theater, and Elena's gentle critique hit home without stinging. As the session wound down and soldiers began cleaning their equipment and preparing to leave, the atmosphere felt fundamentally different from the competitive arena that had characterized the gym during Elena's first week. The space now felt like what it was supposed to be, a place where soldiers came to get stronger, better, more capable, rather than a stage for dominance displays and ego battles. Elena finished her own routine with the same methodical precision she had shown throughout, but now her movements were observed with respect rather than skepticism. As she packed her equipment, several soldiers approached with questions about programming, technique, and training philosophy, the kinds of conversations that marked genuine learning rather than idle curiosity. "Same time Thursday?" Price asked as Elena shouldered her gym bag. "I'll be here," she replied simply. As she walked toward the exit, Elena could feel the weight of observation that had characterized her first sessions, but it had transformed completely. Where once she had been watched with skepticism and dismissal, now she was observed with the attention due to someone who had earned genuine respect through undeniable competence. The door closed behind her with the same pneumatic hiss that had marked her previous departures, but this time she left behind a space that had been fundamentally transformed. The culture had shifted. The hierarchy had been reordered not through conflict, but through demonstration, and the gym had become a place where strength was measured not by volume or theater, but by the quiet competence that Elena had embodied from her first day. 340 pounds had been more than just weight moved through space. It had been a lesson in the difference between looking strong and being strong, delivered with the kind of understated power that leaves lasting impressions on everyone fortunate enough to witness it. And in a world where respect was usually earned through noise and display, Elena had proven that sometimes the most profound statements are made in perfect silence. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.